All right. Welcome everybody to what is hopefully the beginning of a healing process for both the Tekken 8 as a product, but also Tekken 8 as a community. So welcome now to the new patch which fixed things, which adjusted things, and removed some of the broken stuff, which quite frankly, I didn't want to ask for, like, you know, the limited entry one being plus 26. Let's turn off that there, counter it. You know, things that we didn't want and didn't ask for. You know what I mean? Like, I personally didn't want that. I didn't ask for it, and I'm glad it's gone. You know what I mean? So what I want to do now is this time definitively go through his changes and actually discuss what will hopefully be his state moving forward, with probably some adjustments maybe. I don't know how plus or minus certain things are going to be. Let's assume for the moment that his attacks will stay, but the properties and the effects may shift. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each change little by little, show you examples, going to explain what it is, what's good about it, but also any cons or any counterplay, because I want people to understand that, like, because people talk about how this is good, this is busted, how do you deal with this? Well, I guess often people and changes do not discuss these things. They just say, look how strong this is, look how good this is, but they don't just show the way to stop it. I feel in the fairness, in the spirit of fairness to the community and the way to make things more just transparent for people, let's show how good a move is, but let's show how to stop it too. I feel there's no shame in that. It only makes people better. Running 1 is a high that is +5 on its own, but if you don't cancel it, he goes into stance and he's +7. So this is a very powerful tool that they've given him, which goes into his silent entry stance. So if you see, he's going into the crouching state, which is his silent entry stance. You know what I mean? So this is a very important pressure tool that Lars now has in his arsenal to basically mix up your opponent in neutral, outside of, say, something like forward 1-2, or, you know, while standing 2, you know, 2, or while standing 2-3 or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, now you have a tool from running that gives you some plus frames to go into a mix. Now this is +7. As I said at the top, whether or not all these plus frames stay, don't ask me. I don't know. But yeah, so running 1 high, it's +5 on its own with some pushback, or +7 with the silent entry time distance. On hit, it actually goes into a very considerable knockdown. So on its own, let's say you do on its own, you can get like a follow-up like that, and that's a combo. So you can do running 1 back, forward 3-2, and the game will say combo. Right? You can't quite do something like that. That's not possible. But you can do running 1, forward 3-2, and it flips them over, which I like that a lot. It means you can kind of do it on its own, confirm it, knock them down, and get forward 3-2 for the flip over, which I think is very, very good. If you decide to let the silent entry transition rip, on the other hand, you can go for silent entry 2, or silent entry 3. But 1 + 2 unfortunately does not work, which I personally would have liked because you get the nice flip over. But silent entry 3, you get a +9 flip over, which unfortunately is only +9, so it doesn't give you enough plus frames. But you can do something like that, for example. So you can do flip over, forward 3, 1, 2, something like that. Does that make sense? Flip over, forward 3, 1, 2, or flip over, forward 3, 1 + 2. So at +9, you don't quite get the ability to do something like, oopsie, hold on. You don't quite get the ability to do a forward 3-2, unfortunately. You can also do like forward 1 + 2. Yeah. So at +9 after the knockdown, you can do like forward 1 + 2. You know what I mean? To catch like the get up kick. Yeah, which I think is very good. Let's switch to low get up so you can kind of see like the difference, right? Same thing, same thing. So, works for low kick as well. We'll try the recovery kick. Same thing, same thing. But you can't do 4-3-2. If they do low kick, that's why I like 4-1 + 2. Because it catches all the options. Let's see so. Like that. Now, what about, say, spring kick? Oh, what in God's green earth? Well, they're they're face up, feet away, so they can't do recovery kick. So you don't have to worry about spring kick. You only need to worry about mid or low get up kick. I think that's what you need to worry about. So I would advise. So basically, I would advise a sequence like this: running 1 into silent entry 3 follow up, into forward foot 1+2 for the Oki. I think that's pretty good, and you are safe after forward foot 1+2. So I think that's a very viable option, to be honest with you. Or you can commit to it. You can also go into silent entry 2 to set up a sequence like this: full crouch down forward 2. So running 1, silent entry 2, full crouch down forward 2, like that. You know what I mean? Which will catch get up kicks. Or alternatively, you can do full crouch down 1+2, or full crouch 1+2 rather. You know, something like that. So at +9 on the knockdown, it allows you to go for a mix-up as the opponent's getting up. I think it's one of the important things about this sequence. You know what I mean? So you can't say like just do it indefinitely, because it is a high, and your opponent will just like eventually realize. See what I mean? It is a high. However, it looks kind of like a mid, but it is a high. So it's not just like an infinitely abusable move. It is something that, if your opponent is wary, will eventually be able to duck underneath it. That's the way to stop it. You know what I mean? So it's also possible for your opponent to stop some of your options from running 1. So if you go for running 1 into SE1, you will beat them, because Yoshi's set to do a power crush or a heat burst. If I go into 2, I will of course go underneath the armor and counter hit them. If I try to go for something bigger, like SE4, armor will stop it. If I go for something like SE3, the armor will stop it. If I preemptively go for 1+2, the armor will stop it. However, if I delay 1+2, not there. Oh, heat burst is losing. Wait a minute. Oh man, heat burst. There we go. So if I delay my 1+2, which is now his armor move, which we'll get into later, I can, however, call out their attempt to stop me with armor. So that's an option too. That is an option too. You know what I mean? So there is counterplay to running 1, but assume for a moment that they will always go for 1 or for 2, which are Lars's most beneficial options in this instance. Of course, they can also go for nothing, in which case you will be in trouble. Like that. So if they also go for running 1 into nothing, there's a chance that they will whiff punish you instead. So I would say that with running 1, beware that's a high, and he has silent entry mix-ups from it. So depending on like the level of the Lars you're fighting, they have like different options to mix you up. New string. So Lars now has new extensions from down forward 1. So down forward 1 is still his standard poke. +5, 13 frame startup, but the damage is now 12 instead of what it used to be, which I think was 14. But he's now got down forward 1-1, which as you can see is mid-high. Right? So it can be ducked. He's also got down forward 1-1-3, which is safe, -8. Right? Like that. He's also got down forward 1-3. As you can see, though, down forward 1-3 is not a natural hit, and it's -12. So down forward 1-1 is +6. Down forward 1-3 is -12. The purpose of the down forward 1-3 is if your opponent, for example, attempts to crouch block after getting hit, that will happen. You see what I mean? Because if you go for down forward 1-1, right, on block, right, let's say you want to do down forward 1-1, and your opponent is privy to the fact that that's at mid-high. You can do down forward 1-3 and call out their duck and hit him on the wall. Of course, this is a mix-up, so you know what I mean? It's a mix-up. It's not guaranteed. Yeah, that's also a new ender, which we'll get into later. You can do some wildo stuff like that. So does that make sense? Like if you do down forward 1-3, it's a call out for your opponent ducking at the wall, because he now has a string. However, if they stay ducking, you can do, say, down forward 1-1-3, which also wall splats, by the way. So down forward 1-1-3 also wall splats for combo. Why he fell out. There we go. That's the correct combo. Alright, does that make sense? So, like, that's what you want to be looking for. You want to be looking for... Yeah, so and it knocks down normally, so... That's the benefit of having that mix-up now, which is pretty good. Now, on its own, down forward 1-1 is +6 on its own. It's also, if you hold down or down forward, it goes into dynamic entry on hit. Hit or block, to be clear, because look. On hit or block, it goes into dynamic entry, and you are +10. But you are minus if they block it. You know what I mean? So, it is possible for your opponent to interrupt you if you do it on block. But on hit, it goes into a +10 dynamic entry stance, which is very, very beneficial. Like, very, very beneficial. So you can create sequences like this where you down forward 1-1 into a dynamic entry mix-up. You know? And do whatever you want, which is very, very good. You know what I mean? I just showed you before. That's not natural and ends up being -12. However, if it hits counter hit, it ends up being natural. Like that, see? So, on counter hit, that down forward 1-3 is actually natural. Down forward 1-1 is natural anyway. However, this isn't natural. That's never going to be natural. Down forward 1-1-3 doesn't work. Interesting little fact though. If you do down forward 1-1 and a 3 at the end, and the second one catches them, the third hit will be a natural. So look, let me show you something. Down forward 1-1-3, not natural, right? Down forward 1-3, natural and counter it. If you do down forward 1-1-3, if the second one clips them, the third one is natural, interestingly enough. So it kind of creates some goofy situations like that. So if we go back to the wall example, you can end up creating like a combo like that. You see what I mean? And that's a lot of damage. That's a lot of damage. Unfortunately, because they got clipped. The best way to use this down forward 1-1 is now like a pressure tool in neutral. Let's turn off counter hit. It's now a good pressure tool in neutral. It can also be like a 13 frame punish. So at 13 frames, you can use this as a 13 frame punish into a mix-up. Like, Lars traditionally has not had a 13 frame punish. He's got a 12 frame punish. He's got a 10 frame punish, you know, 2-1. And of course he has a 14 frame, which we all know about. He's never had a 13 frame punish that was like meaningful, except for like forward 1+4 in certain unique niche situations. But now he has this, which goes into dynamic entry stance, allowing you to do certain mix-ups, which kind of changes the flow of how you use the character, which I think is very interesting. You've got down forward 1-1-3 just by dialing it. We've also got down forward 1-1-3. There's a slight delay timing you can do, not too much. Which I'm not quite sure what the benefit of the delay is just now, but it existing is at least interesting, right? So if they go for side, walk left, it seems to be that depending on your timing, it's possible for them to step around it. So down forward 1-1-3 is steppable, but it depends on the timing that they do it at. So on block, it doesn't. You can't just kind of like abuse it. Okay, so now on block, I'm not going to do down forward 1-1. Yeah, so as you can see, if I go into dynamic entry transition on block, it's possible to stop Lars from advancing. See what I mean? So if your opponent is wary, you can actually stop him. So this isn't just like a guaranteed mix-up on block. If your opponent retaliates, they will stop you. See what I mean? So no, there's counterplay. This isn't like just abuse it on block. See what I mean? However, if I do down forward 1-1-3, that seems to stop my opponent's retaliation. And that's what the mix-up is. Yeah, so down forward 1-1-3 is what stops them. However, down forward 1-1 stance will lose to retaliation. Because down forward 1-1 has a lot of wall travel, so it actually is a very, very viable combo tool, as I'll now demonstrate. Look at this. Down forward 1-1, 2 den 1. Like that. See what I mean? Down forward 1-1 itself can actually be used within combos to create unique combo pass, which I think is actually quite cool. You know what I mean? So it's actually quite useful in combos as well as in neutral. So, you know, feel free to experiment. As you can see, back one, 15 frames start up, +4 on hit. It is now +14. Counter hit knockdown, which to me is such a powerful tool because it allows Lars to pressure the opponent with a mid-tracking move that has some range, not like infinite range. You know, it's not like unstoppable, it's not like VS. The range is decent, but not absurd. So it's not the sort of thing I can use from like range 2 or something ridiculous like that. I'd have to be, or like range 3 rather. So I'd say about roughly range 2 is pretty good. So range 2, counter hit knockdown, is very, very powerful. It allows for grounded follow-ups, which is really good. So if my opponent will attempt to go for a retaliatory attack while getting up, like that. So my opponent will attempt to do a get up 3. I can then do a forward 3-2, a dynamic entry 2, to call it out, which I think is very, very good. Assuming for a moment that my opponent does not do a get up attack, I can then do this, which leaves me completely safe. So let me set them to block all. If I do back one, and my opponent stands up, I'm completely safe. At +14 allows you to mix them up. You know what I mean? It's also very good too because if, for example, they do a low get-up kick, specifically a low get-up kick, I can jump over it with dynamic entry 3, with DE3, which I think is very, very good. It's a sequence I personally enjoy. Keep in mind this only works specifically if they do the low. If they do the mid, depending on the mid, they could stop you if you delay your timing. Like that. Like if you delay your timing, you can be stopped, but if you go for it immediately, you will hit them as they're getting up, which is very, very powerful. You know? Also, you can do 1+2 as well, but to me that's unnecessary because 2 is quite good. You can also do like running 3. I mean, the possibilities are endless. Like at +14, it puts your opponent in a compromising position on the ground, right? Allowing you for a grounded mix-up of some kind. You know, you can go for Hell Sweep, etc. Like, you know, +14 on knockdown, very, very powerful, allows for grounded follow-up, which is very, very good. Most importantly, for me, it now wall splats again, because this didn't used to wall splat and counter it. So it allows you to pressure your opponent at the wall, or like frame trap them if they try to retaliate. So let me set up a scenario that is valuable in some way. So we're going to need 1 hit on block. I believe these are the armors, so I need him to do that. Okay. So look, after I attack him, right? So I'm going to attack with a move that leaves me at +8, and Yoshimitsu will now retaliate with an attack, as you can see. And if he attempts to do that, and I do back 1, I will now counter hit wall splat him, like so. You see what I mean? So by putting yourself in a position where you have some plus frames, so even like say down forward 1, right? Right? And they attempt to retaliate, like so, you can stop them with the back 1, which will then wall splat them. So like down forward 1 into combo pointer. You see what I mean? So that's, to me, that's very, very good. You want to be able to do something like that. Or you can use the new down forward 1-1. Right? New down forward 1-1 leaves you +6. If they try to retaliate, same thing. Sets up a wall combo. Very, very good. Like, to me, counter hit back 1 knockdown was my most requested chain, so please, thank you so much, Bandai Namco dev team, for implementing that, because personally, as a neutral tool, back 1 counter hit knockdown was one of the most valuable things that I was personally looking for, so I'm glad it's back. You know what I mean? In terms of the way to counter it, I mean, it's a mid-tracking safe attack there's no counterplay other than simply like, you know, don't mash at stupid times. But the, you know, it's not got the craziest range. You know, I can't like loop it infinitely. It's -9. So hold on, I need him to block. So on block, when using it, like I can't say do it indefinitely. So if, for example, right, I'm gonna set my opponent to punish. So I'm gonna do back one into another one. So if I do back one, I can't do like another one. See what I mean? At -9, if you look at my inputs, I am mashing back one. At -9, I can't just do it again. Like, it's not something I can do indefinitely. So you shouldn't worry about this being like an abusable thing in neutral. It's something that on block, I lose my turn. You see what I mean? You know, I can't even do like, say, a jab into it. You know? Or even like a single jab, which is +1 into that. If they retaliate with a jab, I will just lose. So no, this isn't something that you could abuse on its own. It has to be set up appropriately. A good use case is actually after the brand new down 3-1, which I will go over later, but I just want to demonstrate for the sake of this argument. Let's set up the offensive sequence. So here's the offensive sequence. Down forward 1, I get the counter at wall spot. My opponent now attempts to wake up with a mid kick, right, to stop my offense, right? So I do down forward 1 again. And I do back one as they're standing up, and it wall spots their attempt to retaliate. So it's actually a good anti-retaliatory tactic, which is a lot of things to say. It's a very powerful anti-retaliatory tactic, which has the ability to stop your opponent from using a get-up attack while they're getting up. See what I mean? Which I think is very, very good. So down 3-1 is now a new, powerful, consistent wall ender, which is very, very good. You know? I'll show you an example. So, yeah, so down 3-1, which traditionally, down 3-1 is just a... It's a move that, you know, Tesla Gravity. It's an attack that traditionally has had very limited uses. In the past, we would knock down our opponents, and if they stay down in the corner, you do down 3-1, which would pick them up, and it would, like, push them out of the corner, which is always very goofy. But now it's become a combo ender at the wall. So you can now do certain unique routes that were traditionally not possible. And it does a decent amount of damage. So traditionally, you want to do something like this. You want to do back 2-3 into shoulder, right? 73 damage. But now, you can do back 2-3, like down forward 1, down 3-1, and you get like 76 or apparently 77 damage. Like that. So you can actually use down 3-1 as a new wall ender, which is pretty cool. Right? This actually also opens up the possibility for heat dash. Right? A 1-1-1 heat dash situation. And you see how the opponent now goes into that kind of low falling on the ground state? Right? Traditionally, what you'd want to do is you'd want to do down back 2-3, forward 1+4. Like, that was the combo ender, because if you try to do something more advanced, like down forward 1, it doesn't work. You see what I mean? You also can't do, you know, the throw. You can't do the wall throw. Down forward 1. So that's a combo, right? 57 damage. There you go, like that. See what I mean? So, given that they end up in that grounded slump like that, you can then go for the down 3-1 as an alternative, which is a lot more consistent. It kind of pushes them away from the wall, which isn't ideal, but it's still interesting, you know what I mean? So, which is pretty cool, in my opinion. There's also, I mean, there's many other options you have too. So you can, for example, have a situation where it's like you're closing out the game. You want to do like a combo like this, into heat burst, where after the heat dash you get the grounded slump. Before, you had a situation where if you had too many hits on the wall, you couldn't get a heat dash ender. So let's do this following sequence. into heat dash. If you try to do into that, it doesn't work because there's too many hits on the wall. The combo you'd need instead would be forward 4-2 single hit. Heat dash. Down back 2-3 shoulder. Now that works. Try that again. Like that. So you see that's a combo. Because you do back 2-3, there's too many hits at the wall. Right? And they fall out. However, with this new combo, you get more damage by opting to use the back 2-3 instead. Now let's do that exact same combo, but with 4-4-2. So roughly the same damage, but all this means now is you can opt to go for back 2-3, which is a lot easier to confirm than doing 4-4-2. So it creates a powerful, consistent combo ender at the wall, which I think is very, very good. So that sequence, I think, is valuable to think about. It also means that in regular combos, it's the same thing, where so previously you couldn't do, say, that. Too many hits at the wall, right? If you do that, you want to do single hit tornado, right? Which works. But if you did back 2-3, that does not work. The correct thing to do instead, if you do back 2-3, is to do the running throw into shoulder. That's the combo you wanted. But now, you can just do down forward 1, like that. So you can now do a wall hit into the ground ender, which works out quite valuably. Right, let's say you knock your opponent down at the wall, your opponent decides to stay down. Or maybe let's try something which leaves them like this. Your opponent decides to stay down. You've seen situations like this where after a combo, your opponent does not do a get-up kick, they stay down. So let's do a combo real quick. Let's do this exact combo. My opponent stays down. Okay, cool. Well, what happens if your opponent decides to stay down? Your opponent cannot stay down at the wall because that attack actually hits grounded. So if your opponent stays down, the attack, which is called Tesla Gravity Thrust, will pick them up and hit them again. So staying down is not the correct option. See? So it hits grounded anyway. But if it hits him at the right angle on the wall, it will pick them up. So staying grounded is not the option against this, because it actually hits on the floor. You see what I mean? So in terms of the counterplay, this attack it's a low-high, but outside of the wall combo situation, it's actually not a natural string. There's a reason why you never see Lars players use this in neutral, because it's actually not a natural string. As you can see. On hit, it's duckable. So Tesla Gravity on hit is actually duckable. It's a reason why you don't see Lars players use it. The only situation where it might be viable is if as a counter hit, but then... Sorry, did I just hide on their counter? I did. So as you see the following. On counter hit, it's natural. But, you know, beyond that, it's not particularly something that you'd be want to doing. So, also, if you check it out... No, I wanted to block all. Also, if you notice, on its own, it's minus 14, which is quite dire. So on top of being a low-high that's duckable on hit and block, on its own, as a poke, it's actually minus 14. So, it's also that on regular hit, it's minus 3, 15 frames startup, 8 damage minus 3. So basically, this isn't a neutral tool that Larses are using in any typical fashion. This actually just happens to be something that works only uniquely at the wall. So I would advise that if you... Like, you might want to stand up immediately. Like, you get up immediately or roll out of the corner, but don't stay down. Because if the Lars knows you stay down, they'll just do it again. You see what I mean? So my best advice is if you're in the corner... And now that you know this move exists, don't stay down. Like, side roll or do a get-up attack. But beware that the back one can counter at you if you attempt to do that foolishly. So that is the counterplay that is available to you in regards to down 3-1, which is the wall ender. It's interesting to see this attack, which has been kind of a staple in a lot of people's like attack patterns with Lars. It's kind of had a shift to it. In the first place, it actually lost some range. The range isn't quite as high. In fact, as you can see, it's not really hitting from like neutral range. It's actually lost some range, unfortunately. Yeah, as you can see, it's lost some range. Considerable range. It's still like, you know, +1 cancelled, +9 with the silent entry transition. That has remained. The range is, however, worse. What they've done to it is they've actually given it change properties where it gives you a float, a higher float in combos. So you can do stuff like that into silent entry 4, which is now like the new strong aerial tailspin. It's had the unintended consequence, however, that certain easy combos are now impossible. Like that. Did you see that? This used to be an easy combo to do in Season 1. And now that easy combo is now impossible. Because down 4-2 doesn't hit. Which is such a shame. Because this used to be like the easy B&B. Now granted, there are stupid easy combos you can do in Season 2, so you don't have to worry about it. But the original like easy combo is now not viable because of the change to down 4-2, unfortunately. So there's a quick note about that. So now I'm going to hit him with that. He's going to retaliate while standing 4. Right, at +5, if your opponent attempts to retaliate with a while standing 4, or something like that, you can use back 1 to knock him down. As I showed you, back 1 knocks them down. And so on and so forth. You see what I mean? So this sequence I've just told you about, you can leave him standing and set up a mix-up of some kind. Or maybe like a down forward 1-1, you know what I mean? Like, so you're starting to see how it all coalesces together, right? As we go through the changes list, you're starting to see how this all combines and coalesces. Right? Something like that. However, the interesting change is if you do down forward 2 into silent entry, you can actually get a guaranteed silent entry 1. Which is new. That didn't used to be the case because it knocked down before, but now that it knocks down, now that it doesn't knock down anymore, you now get the silent entry 1 heat engager, which is quite powerful. As you can imagine, this also works for heat dash. So you can heat dash it and get like a full combo. So you can do like whatever goofy out combo you want. You know what I mean? You can do that into combo, which is pretty cool. At 14 frames startup, it can be used in situations like, for example, let's say I do down for 1-1, I'm +6, my opponent attempts to retaliate. I can interrupt them and go for that. You know what I mean? Or 1-2, I'm +8. So I do 1-2, +8, right? My opponent attempts to retaliate, down 4-2 will counter hit them. So this now becomes a tool where there's some counterplay involved with your opponent's retaliation situations. Right? It's, however, does not really work, say, on block. Right? Because it is interruptible. On its own, down 4-2 is -11. So if the Yoshi player goes for the jab punish, it's potential to punish me, right? So it's not something you can just do it on block. If your opponent is aware, they can stop you every single time. You know what I mean? So that is the counterplay. You know. But it's good. I think this is a very good change. It's the sort of thing where if you use it at the right times, it's like a good call out. Which I think is quite good. Do you know what I mean? So you can use it as neutral, you can use it as turn stealer. Which I think is quite good. And I should mention that this is only specifically for silent entry 1. This is not the case with the others. Right, so if I go to block all, that's not natural. That, however, is natural, but it knocks down. Right? That's not natural either. That's also not natural. So as you can see, the only natural ones are 1, silent entry 1, and 3+4, which knocks down. But the thing is, you wouldn't want the 3+4. You would more than likely want the 1, which heat engages or heat dashes, respectively. You see what I mean? It also doesn't work for 1+2. You know? So in this case, I find it a viable tool for like a frame trap or turn sealing kind of mechanic. That's kind of where I'd probably want to go for it. As we all know, Sights of 2 is an attack which knocks down on normal hit. And on block, it is -7. So it leaves you safe. So Sidestep 2 in either direction will lead to an attack which on hit knocks down. And allows for follow-ups, which we've talked about in the Sidestep 2 knockdown tutorial video. Right, so as you know, if you combo it with FF3+4, it's guaranteed. But if you use the Stomp, you get guaranteed follow-ups, which your opponent has to guess the correct way to stop it. You know what I mean? So that still works. That hasn't been changed. However, in Heat, he's now got a new property. And I'm going to save the state here. It's now got a new property. It now has this really cool lightning effect, which knocks them down, like so. So it still knocks them down, right? Which is quite cool, right? And it leaves you +27, which is quite a lot. It means that is now guaranteed. It actually says combo. So down 1+2 after Sidestep 2 and Heat is now guaranteed. You can also go for something else like 4-3-2, which is not guaranteed, but at +27, it gives you the ability to go for like a very powerful mix-up. So down 1+2, guaranteed. Down back 4, guaranteed. You get the picture. This is quite good. This is quite good, and that's on hit. How about on block? +6. With the new lightning effect, this ends up being +6. Right? Which is quite good. Forces crouch too. So now let's say my opponent will attempt to go for a punish. Like a while standing 4, right? Let's say my opponent tries to go for a punish like a while standing 4. Fast 11 frame retaliatory move. Right? Well, at +6, you can't do that. At +6, I have the advantage. So I can now go for back 1, which, as we've shown before, will knock you down, as you can see. Very, very powerful, you know? It's very, very good. Right? Or down for 1-1. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're starting, as I said, you're starting to see how his buffs are coalescing together to create mix-ups that the character possesses. You know what I mean? Like, that's the benefit of using this animation. It's quite cool. It is quite good. Now, in terms of the actual applications, it's an attack which is used in neutral and footsies where you're stepping around. So you can kind of use it to catch your opponent slipping. It's interesting to note that, do you know that this actually applies on whiff, not just on block? As you can see, the lightning actually works on whiff. The Sidestep 2 doesn't actually have to hit them. Because if it hits them, it knocks them down. Because both his attack hits them and the lightning. But if the Sidestep 2 whiffs, it's still possible for the lightning to catch them. This also applies on block, by the way. This also applies on block. And you're +6 though. See what I mean? So this applies on block as well. So it's actually possible to do some goofy stuff like that, where you kind of space it out perfectly. They block the lightning and you're still +6. You see what I mean? I will also like to note as well that this applies on grounded hit. So let me now put the opponent on the floor and they won't get up. Okay, and I'll record this state. This actually applies on the floor too. So Sidestep 2 is not a move that hits on the floor. In fact, let's start from the beginning. Sidestep 2 is not an attack which hits grounded. It's not a grounded hitting attack. Like Lars will whiff if they're on the ground. However, the new lightning effect actually hits them on the ground, as you can see. So if my opponent decides to stay down, for whatever godforsaken reason, this will actually hit them on the ground because it's a special law. Leading to really goofy stuff like that. You know what I mean? This is Tekken. The King of Iron Fist tournament. Listen, this game's been an anime game, alright? Like, y'all need to relax. So that is a situation which I find very humorous. Remember what we were talking about, how at the wall, if your opponent doesn't get up, they can get hit by the down 3-1. Well, turns out they can get hit by that as well. And they're +3, which is pretty good. Which leads to the following offensive sequence. Now imagine for a moment, your opponent is at the wall, right? You knock him down, right? You can catch them with the lightning if they decide to, like, get up with something. You know? Right? So, you know what I mean? The lightning catches them if they're on the ground or if they're getting up, which is quite humorous, I find. So, in conjunction, in tandem with Sidestep 2's new heat animation, the same actually applies to Dynamic Entry 3+4, which is forward 3, 3+4. He now gets a new lightning effect, which actually knocks down. So if you'll note that outside of heat, Dynamic Entry 3+4 does not knock down. Right? It does not knock down. It, however, leaves you +4 if you decide to go into Silent Entry transition, allowing for follow-ups which cannot be stopped if you go for Silent Entry 1 or Silent Entry 2. You know what I mean? But it doesn't knock down normally. On counter hit, however, it gives a very unique animation where your opponent has a really nasty stagger, like that. See what I mean? Which allows for a guaranteed follow-up into Silent Entry 1. So traditionally, Dynamic Entry 3+4 does not knock down. But with the new heat version of it, it does knock down. Which is quite, well, Groundhog Day. But yeah, it does knock down like that, as you can see. Which is quite powerful. Which is quite powerful. It's quite good. It's important to note the following, and I think it's very, very important that we get this out of the way right now before anybody cries river. There was some contention initially when this move was first unveiled, where people were worried that it has no counterplay. Because if you look at the following scenario. So it's -14 if I decide not to go into Silent Entry, right? However, if you notice, it's -1. Right? But it can be interrupted. The thing is, there's a very nasty trick you can do where, so even though I can get interrupted, I can do the Power Crush. So either you get hit by it initially, right? And get knocked down. So let's do it like this. Let's do standing and let's make this block all. So let's say you either get hit by it initially and get knocked down, or block it and eat the Power Crush. So get hit by it and get knocked down, or block it and eat the Power Crush if you attempt to stop anything. It seems pretty good. And the thing is, on hit, wait a minute. Yeah, so on hit, the 1+2 is more or less guaranteed if you get the timing right. Alright. There we go. So yeah, the 1+2 is follow-up is guaranteed anyway. So is Silent Entry 2. So is Silent Entry 3. So if you hit them with the DE, 3+4 in heat, you can actually just let your mix-up rip. I'm not quite sure why that's whiffing. Maybe I'm doing it too slow. Yeah, it could be angle too. Or character dependent, but you get the picture. Wow. Yeah, so it hits them grounded, and also if they block the whole thing, I can do that. Their counterplay does exist. Observe. If I attempt to go for the power crush, you can step it to the left, as you can see. So if you block the initial lightning, if you sidestep or sidewalk to the left, you could actually walk around him, right? Sometimes the CPU doesn't stab quite correctly, but yes, if you block the lightning, you can sidewalk it to the left. So this move is not unstoppable. This actually works for all his other follow-ups. Right, so assume for a moment the Lars will go for either 1+2, which I'm delaying, I shouldn't be delaying it, 1+2, or 2, you can sidewalk around it. So no, this is an unstoppable move. Even though, if you block the lightning, it's hard to interrupt him. So, let's say my opponent blocks it, right? You can be thrown if you try to use the armor. If you try to use, so now that's my trying to do silent 1. I'm trying to do silent entry 1, and I can be thrown. See? So silent entry 1 gets thrown. Silent entry 2 will go underneath the throw, but not counter hit them. Silent entry 4 will get thrown. It's only silent entry 3+4 which will jump it. But keep in mind, the average Lars player is looking for the 1+2, so they will get thrown. You see what I mean? Or the 1, and they'll get thrown. So you can throw them out of it, or you can sidewalk left. See? So this is not an unstoppable mix-up. This is not an unstoppable mix-up. There is counterplay. You simply need to figure out the timing in which your character needs to evade the follow-ups. Because the only thing that Lars player can do is go for silent entry 4, which can be thrown if the person decides to throw it, or silent entry 3+4, which will knock down and track. But that's like 10 layers deep where the Lars knows that you can sidestep it, so they'll go for an additional option to stop your sidestep, when traditionally they want the knockdown from the dynamic entry 3+4. You understand? And when he knocked down, it's still a combo, you understand? So yeah, like that's kind of how it works. Finally, I should mention that the actual attack itself, right? The actual attack itself, similar to the other ones that I was showing you, right? If you stay down, right? So the stomp itself hits grounded. It always has. You know, the stomp itself hits grounded. Always has. That's the whole point. It's a stomp. But the lightning will also catch. It's a bit hard to hit this one just with the range, but like the lightning also hits grounded like that. The range isn't like perfect, but you get the idea. The lightning will catch. So if I knock him down and back up, you can see that it's spaced perfectly. The lightning actually hits him on the ground, which is pretty goofy as well, and I think it's quite funny. And I would love to see a scenario where that kills, because to me that would look incredibly sick. If your opponent stays down and you hit them with not the stomp, but rather the lightning instead. So to me that would be a very satisfying finish, where I don't know, you knock your opponent down, they stay down. But yeah, getting the range is the thing that's hard. Yep, if you killed someone with that scenario, that would be immensely satisfying, and I would love to see that. Alright. So now 442 now hits on the ground again, just like Tekken 7, right? Which didn't used to be the case. The downward hurt box has been extended, so now 442 now hits grounded, right? This now creates a scenario where you can set up your opponent to retaliate. If they attempt to retaliate as they're getting up, you get a follow-up on the floor. So let's look at the following offensive sequence. Let's say I hit him with a combo of some kind. Okay. And I use an option which is silent entry 3+4, which puts my opponent face down, head towards. They will now attempt to wake up with a mid get-up kick. Right? as you can see. In the following offensive sequence, if my opponent decides to stay down, the 4-4-2 will hit them, correct? If, however, my opponent attempts to do a get-up kick instead, in the following offensive sequence, forward 4-2 will now launch them for a full combo. So it actually creates a situation, a sequence, where if your opponent stays down, the forward 4-2 will hit them. If they get up with a mid-get-up kick, you'll get hit. You immediately hold back and stand up. So you don't stay grounded, you don't mash getting up, you want to immediately stand up and hold back. So that way the forward 4-2 does not get you, and then you're now minus 13. So that's how you want to stop the offensive sequence. So it's not unstoppable, once again, it's just a situation where if your opponent either stays down or chooses to mash on get up, they will get hit by the forward 4-2 and get launched, which is obviously not favorable. So Silent Entry 4. This is a rather interesting one because this attack has now lost its armor property. This is no longer an armor attack, as you can see. He's not got the armor spark. It is now instead +4. So it is now +4, but it has lost its armor property, as you can see. +4 on block, but no more armor property. On hit, it leaves them very, very close on knockdown. As you can see, +31, which allows you to do that. Forward 4-2, which we just saw. So forward 4-2 will give you the guaranteed follow-up, which flips them over. You can also do, you know, at +31, you can also do forward 3-2. Or go for like a stomp mix-up, for example. No. With a knockdown that good, you have a myriad of options. Particularly if your opponent attempts to get up with something. You know, so if I time it right, I can counter hit, there we go, like that. I can counter hit their get up with Hell Sweep. You know what I mean? Or 4-4-1+2 to catch, like, you know, them mashing something. So it's now a close range knockdown on hit, but +4 on block, which is very, very good. It's a strong aerial tailspin in combos, which is new for Lars and, well, a lot of characters, which allows you to go for unique and, well, interesting routes. One of the routes that we've been using kind of recently is something to the effect of this. I'll show you like a standard combo. So remember how down 4-2 allows you to go into it on block? You can now, on hit, sorry. You can now do down 4-2 into send 4 to get that strong aerial tailspin, which allows unique combo paths. So for example, you can do like this. Down 4-2, send 4, jab. Like that's now like a new combo route that's possible. See what I mean? And the damage is very good too. You know what I mean? At least I think you can. Maybe you can. Hold on. Oh, there we go. So you can also do something like that. And that's quite optimal too. You know what I mean? So using the new strong aerial tailspin, it allows like new combos that weren't possible previously, which I think is quite good, which is quite compelling, I find. However, losing its armor function means that you can no longer use it in the way we used it previously. So I'm not going to turn on my opponent's retaliatory actions, and I'm going to go for it on block. So I'm not going to do, as you can see, losing its armor function now means you have to remember that this is no longer the armor option, and you will be hit if you attempt to use it to interrupt your opponent. You see? This is no longer an armor function. Yeah, so where it's good to use is after running 1. So you running 1 +7 into that, get a knockdown. Which one is this one? Which one's Heat Burst? Okay. So if you do running 1, send 4, if they attempt to press something, you'll get knocked down. And you get a little fall up on the ground, right? Right, depending on what they do, it's like a jab, you might trade. However, if it's something a bit slower, you might stop them. right? So I would say that after running 1, silent entry 4 is quite solid, but I wouldn't want to do it after like a down 4-2, for example. That's probably a bad idea. You know what I mean? So it's very, very good in combos, and it's a good pressure tool. +4. Right? Down for 1-1. See? Coalescing. Synergy. Right? Oops, wrong move. Right? So you can now use it in tandem with his other tools. You know? To kind of continue the pressure. It creates kind of pressure situations, which I think is pretty good. Conversely, his armor now belongs to 1+2, which is now -13. So now 1+2, silent entry 1+2, is now his armor attack, but it ends up being -13 because it's a min, which I actually find a bit of a nerf. 1+2 used to be good because it was a 14-frame startup, safe mid pressure tool, which on hit would knock down, but more importantly, flip over. +20 with the flip over. And if your opponent does something in wake up, they will of course get hit, as we can see. Like that, see? So on hit, it's still as viable as it's ever been. However, on block, it is now a power crush and minus, which is a shame. However, what this means is you can now use it as the way to stop people from retaliating. You see what I mean? Like, this is now the way to stop people from retaliating if they attack you as you're doing a silent entry transition. But it's -13 on block, which is unfortunate, and personally I'm not a fan of, but you know, it is what it is. As I'm sure you saw before, this is good for catching get-up attacks, because as you recall, Dix works with that, where you can do into the 1+2 on the floor, if it hits, but sometimes it does. Yeah, so this also works on the floor, and it's a good way to catch people. You can catch them with the silent entry 1+2 to knock them down, which flips them over, which is really good. If you use the new heat dynamic entry 3+4, you can create a situation like this. Let's show that again. It happened a little bit fast. So what I did there, I went into heat burst. I then used dynamic entry 3+4 stomp, which will combo if you hit a timer, right? If you time it correctly. As you can see. So it does combo. If your opponent does nothing when this hits them, they'll just get flipped over, as you can see. So if your opponent does nothing, they will just get flipped over for free, as you can see. The same applies to silent entry too. They'll just hit them guaranteed. However, if your opponent decides to wake up with an attack, like even recovery kick, which is usually quite fast, it will actually, silent entry 1+2 will actually hit them on the ground because it's armored, so you'll actually launch them, as you can see. You're probably wondering about low kick as well, so we'll go through it. It's the same thing. It says counter because they're doing wake up low kick and I'm countering them. What about spring kick? Same thing. If they attempt to spring kick me, the Sen 1+2 will armor it and launch them out of the air. So if you attempt to do any sort of follow-up in that situation, you will get hit by it. My best advice in this situation is to either just take the initial hit and roll and get up, or do nothing at all. Like, just do not stay down. Take the initial hit, roll and get up, but simply do not stay down. And definitely don't wake up with an attack. I'm simply showing you what happens if you attempt to press a swing kick here. Yeah, so take the initial hit, get flipped over, and then get up. That's the way to kind of avoid getting a darker fate, let's say. A much darker fate. But that's just kind of a use case where silent entry 1+2 can be used in tandem with other moves. You know what I mean? Full crouch 1+2. This is an attack which traditionally is only +1 on its own. Right. +1 on its own, that's it. That's about it. If you now hold down, he goes into limited entry, making it +3. Right? So, let me show you now the following. Yoshimitsu's going to do while standing 4 when I do this. Right? At +3, if I while standing 4 them, you can't do anything about it. See? At +3, I get that. However, I don't quite get something bigger like limited entry 2. That's not real. And I can't do limited entry 1 either. So limited entry does not work. You could only do into while standing 4. You see? You can only do that. You can't do anything ridiculous. I should also mention, as well, you cannot do it into another one. So, let's say you think, oh, can this be like looped or something wacky like that? Well, no, you can't do into another one and keep going. If you do a second one, you don't get another transition. So it's not an infinite loop. You can only do into another one if you so choose. Also, if your opponent is wary and goes for a while standing 4, if you try to do another one, you will be interrupted. So it's not possible to loop it into itself indefinitely. You will be interrupted if you try to do it again. You see what I mean? Also, very important, the cancel only occurs on hit, not on block. If this is blocked, you cannot cancel into limited entry. And it's still -12, so you will eat a while standing 4. So this cancel, as you can see my inputs, does not work on block, it only works on hit. This is quite different to his other limited entry situations, like, for example, I'm going to show you this. That works on whiff. That also works on block, so I need him to block everything. Hold on. Block all, block all. So as you can see, Damek 1-3 on block goes into it, 1-4 goes into it. So as you can see, only works on hit, whereas with the others, on block, on block, on block. Interestingly, this one does not work on block for some godforsaken reason. But yeah, very, very good. It's very, very good, I think. It's very good to add to his mix-up game, because it means that you can go for, you know, a mix-up, leaving you at +3. You know? I wouldn't advise overextending, though. I wouldn't advise that. I kind of showed it just now earlier, but if you noticed, his other transitions have increased frame advantage. So they used to be +1. They are now +3. They are now +3, so let's make him eat the full thing. Try it. So they are now +3, which is very, very good. So at +3, it gives you more frame advantage as well. So now let's get him to retaliate with a variety of attacks. Yeah. So those are the power crush and heat burst. Let's start off those. You know? As you can see, at +3, it leaves me enough advantage to prevent them from retaliating, which is quite good. Right? Very, very powerful. However, certain things will trade, so depending on what your opponent does, for example, like a down forward 1, it's possible to trade with Lars and stop him. You see what I mean? If they press the correct thing. But at +3, you have more options, which is very good. So. You will lose. That hasn't changed, you know? Oh my goodness. Yeah, so if your opponent goes to armor you, you will still get stopped. Like, it's not invincible. If it's a heat burst, it'll float you like that. So this isn't like a be-all and end-all strategy. You still lose to armor. So the counterplay is to armor the follow-up. Of course, if I go for limited entry 1, I will stop it. But remember, only +4 again, back to +4. It's back to +4, not +26, you know. So, the risk-reward for getting hit by the 1 isn't the end of the world, quite frankly. It now creates a situation where you can contest it, which is good. In Heat also is quite powerful too. Because in Heat, as I'm sure I showed you, you can then go for this limited entry 1 transition, which is quite powerful. Like that, which is very, very good. Now, assume for a moment that they go for, let's say, an attack instead. Right? If they do down forward 1 like that, though, like you'll trade. Oh my goodness. I don't know what's going on with my down backs. My controller might be finished. Yeah, so you'll trade if they go for that. If they go for a jab, however, you will hit them. As I'm sure you can see. Yeah, so your opponent can usually go for something like that. However, if they go for an armored move, as so, I will show you in a second, you will lose. So, and if it's a heat burst, they'll hit you out of the air. So there's counterplay. There's counterplay. Like, at +3, it gives you a bit more leeway to play around, but your opponent can armor you or down forward 1 you to interrupt, which may trade. And if you hit them with the Len 1, the limit entry 1, at only +4, it's not the end of the world. It's like you'll eat the mix-up. Or if it's in Heat, you'll eat the transition, but it's not like the worst possible fate. You see what I'm saying? I'd say this is a situation where it's decent for both the defender and the attacker. One change I'm not particularly happy about, and by not particularly happy, I mean I'm very displeased with, is this. Those remember back 4. Back 4 is an attack which, let's get him to block all. Just so your eyes aren't deceiving you. Back 4 is a 15 frame startup +8 move, which is typically used as a frame trap or a neutral tool to catch, like a counter hit button. I'm now going to show you something that may be mildly upsetting. The counter hit's gone. It's still it's still +8, still 15 frames, but the counter hit on back 4 is now gone. Completely. Completely, it's gone. What they've done to it is they've now made it a hit activated input. When I say hit activated, I mean it's something that only on hit will work. So I'm now going to do this. If you look at my inputs real quick, I'm going to do, notice how I'm pressing 1+2. Why? Because on hit, if I press 1+2, I get the guaranteed. It's a hit activated move now. But it's 38 damage. They have nerfed the damage, which was traditionally 55, used to be 50, now then became 55, on counter hit, to now a normal hit, 38 damage attack. It's not necessarily hit confirmable, because if it hits, I can't really press it in time. It's not hit confirmable, unfortunately. You have to kind of just let it rip, because on block, it's completely safe. So, there's no benefit, there's no weakness, rather, to just letting it rip. Like, what's going to happen? Like, your opponent can't do anything about you doing the 1+2, but if it hits, you get the transition. It now has become a neutral tool. In counter hit, it does 42. So it still doesn't do anywhere near as much damage as it used to. It used to do 55 on its own, and with Rage, it used to do 60 damage, which was quite devastating. It's not a confirm. No, you just have to do it. There's no confirm. You cannot visually hit confirm it. Like, if I see it hit, I can't hit confirm it. You have to just mash it. It's a hit activated transition. It's not something you can do as a hit confirm. You have to just do it. This is a change I'm really not a fan of. I understand that the utility of the move was perhaps limited by being relegated to being a back 4, but there was something so satisfying about hitting counter hit back 4. There's something so satisfying about counter hit back 4, especially after frame trap. You know, going for a frame trap, like a 1-2 into a counter hit back 4 was so satisfying, alright? Now, I'm going to turn on their retaliations once more, so we can see. But look, because you could do like a basic frame trap, like a 1-2 into back 4, and if your opponent mashed, the counter hit back 4 did that, you know, really strong 55 damage. Instead of making a counter hit launcher or something else, it's now just a hit confirmable move, which I can't say I'm a fan of. Sorry, not hit confirmable. It's now a hit activated move. So, as you can see, I did a frame trap there. So look, Yoshimitsu's now attempting to retaliate. So I'm doing 1-2. Yoshimitsu's attempting to retaliate. Right? I'm now just doing it and getting the counter down to 42. This is a change I'm not particularly a fan of, personally. Personally, I'm not particularly a fan of it. It's now a useful neutral fishing tool. However, it's lost some of its kind of majesty. You feel me on that? It's kind of lost something that made it special. Well, we move on. A change which I'm personally a big fan of on the other instance is this. Down back 1+2 is now a natural combo into 1-2. Because traditionally, this was a counter hit launcher. Down back 1+2 was a counter hit launcher, especially in Tekken 7. Right? On counter hit, in Tekken 8 Season 1, dynamic entry 1-2 was a natural combo. But that was only on counter hit. But the counter hits were so rare, like so rare. They have now changed it so that on normal hit, that's a natural hit. Massive, massive, massive change. I think that's a fantastic change, quite frankly. Yeah, down back 1+2 going into it is good. So if you notice on hit, +8, which is massive. That's huge. It used to be +6. Now on hit, it's +8, which is why, as you can see, oh my god, sorry. With the dynamic entry cancel, it's +11. Making this a natural thing, which is a massive buff, because it used to be you had to get a counter hit to get the dynamic entry 1-2 follow-up, which was so rare. The active frames never seemed to work out in your favor. Of course, this applies to heat dash as well, so you can get a combo. Like that. Obviously, heat dash combos have been nerfed, so that's why that damage is really bad, but you get the picture. So the fact that this now is a natural heat engager is super important. This ends up being useful for certain situations where you can kind of scheme. So there's a very unique sequence that Lars is able to do, where you do 4-3-2 into backswing, like that. So you will do 4-3-2, and then backswing your opponent, like that. So a good use case for down back 1+2 in its new state is to do something like a 4-3-2 and then do down back 1+2 to anticipate their attack and backswing them like so. You see what I mean? So that is a good situation where it's good to use it. The attack on its own retains its original properties, which is it's still -13. So not -14 on Tekken 7 because there's no combo anymore. However, it is -13, so it is still punishable. It also means that if you attempt to do this on block, you will get countered. So if you try to do this on block into any follow-up, you will be countered. So this isn't like a infinite pressure thing where you can just do it. A keen-eyed player will be able to stop you immediately. So no, you can't just simply do the stance on block. Sorry, I'm not getting my inputs. Wow, what is going on? Yeah, so keen-eyed players will be able to immediately stop you if you attempt to go for the stance transition prematurely. But the important thing is that on hit, it works. So it's great for hard reads. In the same vein of heat engage opportunities, they have now made something quite monumental to down forward 3, which is a tool that was only ever used for combos. You've seen down forward 3 in combos a million times. Like, this is one of his staple combos, which you've seen for pretty much the entire Tekken 7 and Tekken 8. That. We've seen that all the time in combos, right? Alright, so down forward 3, which is this attack, this advancing kick, which on hit is +8. 16 frames +8 on hit, which is quite good, right? However, one of the changes they've made is on block, it's now -11, right? There's a reason for this. It's because now down for 3-3 is now a natural hit combo, right? It also wall splats, like that. So down for 3-3 is now a natural combo, right? This seems really, really good until you realize it's -15. So certain characters will be able to launch you. So you can't simply abuse this non-stop. This is actually not even just a giving up your turn. You are literally launch punchable if you do this. Particularly at the wall too. So if you do that, look, do you see this? You are basically giving up not just a turn, but giving up your life potentially. So down for 3-3 being natural is kind of insane. However, -15, so very, very launch punishable. Very, very launch punishable. So down forward 3, if you attempt to go into a stance transition on block, especially it being -11. So as you can see, hold on, I need him to do the jab punishes. So -11, so not -13, not punishable, but punishable with a jab, as you can see. So on its own, punishable with a jab, at the very least. This also means that if I try to go into a stance transition, I can be hit. So this isn't infinite pressure either, because if you attempt to go into a stance transition, dynamic entry specifically, you will get hit. So as you can see, the counterplay is, if you try to use it on block, you'll get hit. So no bueno. You know? You can be armored, all sorts of things. So no, you cannot simply go for this on block. However, despite down forward 3-3 being -15, the more important thing, and the reason why I want to show you, because here's the thing, the reason I wanted to show you that you can interrupt it on block is because of the following. This is now natural. Down forward 3 down into dynamic entry into 1-2 is now natural. As you can see, it's now +15 on hit. +8 on normal hit. +15 on the transition. Like so. So if you tempt the down forward 3 like that, you now get that. See? This is exactly why I wanted to show you that on block it's interruptible, because they can't just do that on block. On hit, it goes into that. You see what I mean? However, this is important. Let me show you again. This is very important. Very important. On block, you will be interrupted. So no, you cannot just abuse this on block. You will be stopped. You see what I'm saying? So no. There is counterplay. There is counterplay. This is now turned into a very viable whiff punish. Because, let me show you a sequence that I came up with a bit earlier. Where I did this. You might have seen this earlier. This is a very good use case for this. Remember how I showed you how running one on its own is +5? Look what happens if my opponent attempts to retaliate at range. Because let's say they think I'm going to do this. Right? They think I'm going to do like into that. Remember how I showed you that trying to do into silent entry 4 can be stopped? Remember I showed you that? It's only if you do it into 1 where you stop them. Well, let's say your opponent thinks you're going to go for that. You're looking for the extra plus. You're going to do plus into plus. You're going to do running 1, silent entry 4. That's what they're looking for. Well, if you do running 1 on its own, your opponent attempts to retaliate. That. Do you see what I mean? gives me an opportunity to punish them. See what I mean? Because if they're expecting me to do a silent entry follow-up, I can cancel the attempt and whiff punish them instead. We're down for 3, down 2. So now this is a very powerful whiff punish option. Like so. But yeah, in this scenario, I use a while running 1 on block on its own, no silent entry transition. They attempted to retaliate with a button. I then used down forward 3, down cancel into dynamic entry to then hit them with the 1-2 heat dash. You understand? It's all about to take in, but the point being that, like, you can set up situations where your opponent can retaliate and you can go for that. You can also set up frame traps too. So for example, if your opponent is something to the effect of, let's say, -15 or more, right? So let's say I go for, on hit, I go for something like that, 1-2, right? Because remember, this is 16 frame startup, right? So I need to be at least +6 or more. So let's say I want to do like a 1-2. My opponent's going to retaliate with a button. Oh, let's turn off Power Crush. Right? I'm going to be +6 or more. My opponent retaliates with a button of some kind, right? What that means is I can do this. Like, right? I call out their attempt to retaliate in their minus situation, right? And I now get a guaranteed frame trap. This also works very well with down forward 1-1. Because remember, down forward 1-1 on its own, +6. If you choose not to cancel into the dynamic entry stance, you can go for a frame trap like this. Down forward 1-1, +6. My opponent will attempt to retaliate with a down forward 1 or a jab. You see what I mean? So I'll do down forward 1-1 on hit, down forward 3, oops, still a little bit slow. Oh my. It's because it's 16 frames exactly. Like that. You see what I mean? Yeah. Ooh, +16. Oh, okay. For a second there, I was like... Yeah, you get the picture. You're too far for the forward back 2-1. Yeah, so if your opponent attempts to retaliate, when they're -6 or more, you've now created a situation. You can also do like down for 3 on its own, which leaves you +3 and lets you go into it. See, that's a very strong tool. Very, very powerful. Very, very strong. All right. But as I showed you earlier, the counterplay is the attack on its own is -11, so punishable. Transitions into dynamic entry stance can also be interrupted, so it's not something you can just get away with for free. Heat Smash is now +13 on block, which is very, very good. The consistency on block's also been like altered, which is quite nice. So at +13, it allows you to go for very powerful mix-ups afterwards. So you can go for dynamic entry 3 afterwards, right? You can do stuff like that. They will attempt to go for throw or while standing 4, but at +13, if I go for dynamic entry 2, my opponent will be countering it. Like so. See? So my opponent cannot retaliate by trying to go for an option like that. Obviously I have, that's a training mode problem. Obviously I'm not going into heat again, because that's not how that works. But yeah, I can go for dynamic entry 3 to continue the pressure, or I can also still, even though dynamic entry 2 is a good option because it's a safe counter hit, you can also go for 1, which will leave you at +8, quite powerful. And you can mix in like a back 1 there afterwards, after you got that. Or 4 for 1 +2 because you're +8. So basically, with this amount of frame advantage from the Heat Smash, you can now use whichever option from dynamic entry you want. With the exception of 3 +4, which is a little bit too slow, depending on what they do. Right? However, because of the options they're going for, 3 +4 will counter hit them, which is quite good. See what I mean? The reason I'm using Yoshimitsu specifically is I want to demonstrate what happens if they use the dreaded flash attack. So if they use the flash attack, I can't use the stomp. I can't use 4, then 4. I can't use then 3. I have to use 1, 2, 1 plus 2, but also more importantly, 2. Dynamic entry 2 will now frame trap everything, including a Yoshimitsu flash, which is to me very important. That's a very big buff, I find. Like so, you know what I mean? So being able to use dynamic entry 2 after that, I think is massive. Very, very massive. Also, people are aware that as a system-wide change, you can now go into heat from stances. So for Lars, it's for forward 3, which is dynamic entry. A good use case of this is you can do something to the effect of this. Now, I try to lab this one. This one's a bit funny to lab, but hopefully I can show it in a way that makes sense. So, as you recall earlier, I was showing you what happens if you try to use the stance on block, right? You can do stuff like that, where you do that. If you anticipate your opponent's going to try and stop your stance transition, you can now do down forward 1-1 into stance. Guess that they're going to do a retaliation and heat burst their attempt to stop you. You see what I mean? Which is kind of like a high-level mix-up. Which is quite strong, I think. Like so. See? Now that's pretty good. This also means that in heat, you can also go for, let's say, they attempt to armor you, right? A good place to show this would be on hit, not on block. So, in heat, you can heat smash from stance. So look, if you look at my inputs, I'm doing forward 3, and then I'm pressing 2 plus 3 during the forward 3. So I could do a situation where I go for into that, right, and they'll try to stop me, right? They'll try to stop me. I can now do heat smash afterwards to interrupt their attempt to stop me. You see what I mean? So that's a good use case of where to use heat smash now, both with its additional frame advantage on block as well as doing it from stance. That's a situation where it's pretty good. Another note in regards to frame advantage is in regards to, and we're going to turn on everything for this one except for that, is in regards to forward 4. So forward 4-2 is now plus 11, up from plus 9. What this means is that all of your follow-ups have a higher chance of hitting. So as you can see, the Yoshi's retaliating with everything we've shown you so far. They're using down forward ones, they're using jabs, power crush. At plus 11, it is now impossible to do so. At plus 11, you will now lose if I do oh my goodness, it's because I'm doing everything. You will now lose if I use a dynamic entry too, which is quite a strong option. You see what I mean? Same with Stomp. Stomp will also interrupt your opponent if they attempt to stop you from doing this mix-up. It will, however, lose to stuff like Jab. Now, Jab will lose if I do the 2, like so. The Jab is going to lose if I do that. But, so in fact, I think I need to demonstrate this correctly just so it's clear. So Jab, I believe, is that. So if I do FF4-2, right, they're going to retaliate with Jab. If I do FF4-2, I'll beat Jab. If I do FF4-2, 3 plus 4, Jab will stop me. You see what I mean? And it will also stop everything else. If I try to go for 3, if I try to go for 4, I will lose. 1 plus 2, however, will beat every option because it's very fast. The same with 1-2. But those are both high options. With the addition of Den 2 being fast enough now, because of being plus 11, it means that you can prevent them from retaliating, which I think is very good. Very, very good. You know what I mean? It's still an incredibly big risk, because at 22 frame startup, 21 frame startup, and minus 31 on block, this is still a monumental risk that you're taking. This is an attack that some people are able to buffer a low input to block it, some people are able to see it, or some people are able to just straight up react. As a result, starting your offense with such a big risk it's like the risk reward is there. You are creating a really high amount of frame advantage by taking a big risk on attack such as this. I also want to make it very apparent that this actually works very closely with the changes to heat engagers. So as you all are aware, heat engagers are now +9. What that means is you can no longer do heat engager into Hell Sweep. If I try to do that, I'll be stopped. At +17 in Season 1, this was a possible mix-up. But +9, I can no longer do forward, forward, forward 2. Look, let me show you just so you're sure. Look at this. I can no longer do this. That's no longer enough frame advantage, because this is 21 frame startup. At only +9, I'm no longer able to do FF42 as a mix-up. This is now not possible. It also means that if I delay my timing, or if I try to hit confirm it, my opponent can actually sidewalk out of the way. And I think you have to sidewalk left. Like that. As you can see, the counterplay now is that Hell Sweep is no longer a free option after Heat Engager. Heat Engagers do no longer give you so much frame advantage that you can get away with doing that. The final thing I'll show with FF42 is, to me, one of the more important things, is the way to beat someone's ability to rage. And that's not a pun, I mean like literally. Use the rage art option, that is. I'm not talking about rage. You can also rage if you want to. So I will now go for FF42. Right into, oh, they're sidewalking. I'll now go for FF42 into a dynamic entry transition. My opponent is now going to try and rage art me. Traditionally, you'd want to do 1-2, which would stop them, right? Or 1+2. But these can be Twitch Duck, they can be OS, right? As you can see, no smoke and mirrors. If I do that, it will stop them. But look, if I try anything else, see? I got rage arted. If I try this, I got rage arted. But however, did you see that? Dynamic Entry 2 will now stop the rage arts. You will not get a counter hit. It will, however, stop the rage arts, which is still quite important. Giving you the +7, giving you the frame advantage to continue your offense. And so on and so forth. This is quite important, I find. Right, this is very, very powerful. You see what I mean? That's very, very good. They're no longer able to rage art you if you do this. One of the big changes that I'm personally a fan of, that I'm personally a big, big fan of, is how they've increased the range of 3+4. Now, 3+4 is one of my most used attacks in the game anyway, one of my most used moves in the game. But they've increased the range. They've given it a lot more forward momentum. As you can see, he steps quite far. It's quite similar to his old forward 3 from previous games. It now hits from roughly about like range 3 or so. So about like range 3. Like that. You see what I mean? Safe 17 frame heat engager. Yeah, so this tool is considerably powerful. Because from a decent amount of range, you can now do that. Which is really good. Like so. See? So from about range 3, you are now able to heat engage, which is very, very good. So if you use an attack which leaves you safe with some distance, like, for example, forward 1+2, you can be far enough, you can backdash and whiff punish them. Like that. See what I mean? The increased range will allow you to use it from decent ranges. It's quite good, I find. So it's very, very good. So to me, this is one of the best changes, giving 3+4 increased range. 3+4, however, it's quite a linear move. It is very easy to step. Like that, see? So you cannot just abuse it on block. Your opponent can sidewalk it if you, let's say, do it more than one time. Also, at 17 frame startup, it's pretty fast, but not so fast it can stop your opponent from stepping. So this can be sidewalk left. See what I mean? The emergency patch that was rolled out for Season 2, which fixed a lot of things in terms of the game, it has now reinstated Lars's limited entry 1 back to +4, which is what it was when the game first launched. No more +26 with a crazy knockdown. That's now gone, thankfully. Interestingly, Dynamic Entry 2 took a hit, going from 19 damage to 17 damage. It's the reason why certain combo paths have slightly less damage than they used to. It's only by a factor of 2 to 3. Certain combos have lost damage by 2 to 3. It's not monumental, but it's just there. So now you'll have to work a little bit hard if you want 80 plus damage, which is fair enough. That's not, to me, the end of the world. According to the patch notes, Silent Entry 3 has gone from 23 damage to 19, except in the game it says 20. I don't know if this was a mistake, because that's quite a big difference. I mean, 19 damage instead of 20, that's kind of a big difference. However, it's clear that in the game it is 20. So this isn't a massive deal. This only affects certain combos. And also, this is kind of relevant to the fact that Silent Entry 3 is now -13 instead of -14. Granted, nobody with a -14 launcher was launching it anyway, so it is, of course, what it is. More important is that down back 2-3 charge no longer gives you the stagger at the ball. It's still +13, you just no longer receive the wall bounce stagger. You know, you no longer receive the new tactics wall crush, as it's called. That is now a done deal. Still +13, but you don't lose that. On hit, down back 2-3 is still the new tactic. It's just not that on block. But the reason why this is fine in quotation marks, down back 2-3 is -13. So an attempt to do this in neutral will net you a knockdown more than likely. You see what I mean? A lot of characters will potentially knock you down. But on block, it's very unlikely someone will let you do this full charge. You know what I mean? And unlike other characters, if you charge it only a little bit, you're still -13. See? If I delay the timing, I'm still -13. I have to actually charge it for it to be +13. Like so. Finally, there was a way for people to go from down 4-3 down into 1+2, dynamic entry 1+2. This has now been patched. There was a way to do what's called a plank, where you quickly press or quickly graze your hands over 2 buttons, that being 2-1, to instead get dynamic entry 1-2, which, as I showed earlier, is a guaranteed combo. Instead get 1+2, which is a launcher, because dynamic entry 1+2 is a instant tornado launcher, as you can see. Because the heat engager only heat engager heat dash, but this is a guaranteed launcher. So as you can imagine, if you could somehow do that into a launcher, it was pretty stupid. It has now been since removed. A final note I'd like to make in the video is about one thing in particular that I have an issue with. I'm now going to finally give Yoshi a break, and I'm going to shift over to Kazuya. There currently exists a, in my opinion, inconsistency issue within Season 2, where I'm not sure if it was a change to Dynamic Entry 2. I'm not sure if it's an axis issue, but there now exists an issue where if you do up forward 4, forward 3, 2, characters will now fall out of the combo. This is not an issue in Season 1. Something has happened with this particular input where characters will now fall out, and this happens for maybe half the cast. So now doing up forward 4, forward 3, 2, characters will now fall out, which is very frustrating. You can delay your timing, so do up forward 4, wait, forward 3, 2, like so. You have to do wait, forward 3, 2, forward 1, 2, 3. In some ways, you could argue this is better because it allows you to visually confirm that the up forward 4 hit. Personally, I'm not a fan of this because I am used to immediately seeing the up forward 4 hit and go for forward 1, 2, 3. This has never been a difficulty for me personally and a lot of Lars players. And I find that this is an inconsistency issue that hurts just the general flow of his gameplay. Because yes, you can wait a little bit and confirm it, but personally, I don't like this. I should add that this was an issue in Tekken 7 Season 3. This is actually a returning issue, strangely enough, from Tekken 7 Season 3, where up forward 4, forward 3, 2, forward 1, 2, 3 was not consistent. So you had to wait a second and do forward 3, 2. To me, that waiting a second to confirm it, I was never a fan of it, personally. It never felt good to me. You can still do forward 3, 1. That still works. That's worked since Tekken 7. Like, this combo still works. The Tekken 7 combo? Oh, sorry, hold on. Let me show you Tekken 7 Season 1-2 combo. That was a Tekken 7 Season 1 and 2 combo. Can you believe it? Yeah. Like, the Tekken 7 Season 1 and 2 combo still works in Tekken 8. That still works. That hasn't gone away, you know? That still works perfectly fine. However, there is now a known inconsistency with forward 1, 2, 3, and I sincerely hope the devs fix this, because having to delay it, in my opinion, it doesn't feel good. Like, it doesn't feel good when in Tekken 8 Season 1 and launch Tekken 8, it worked perfectly fine for the entire cast. No consistency issue whatsoever. I'm not sure what changed, but an inconsistency has been introduced to the character's juggle, which I'm personally not a fan of. So I just want to add that on the end, just as a PSA, to be like, please, devs, you've done a lot of great things with this patch. However, I'm not particularly happy with the inconsistency in this instance, and I would hope that you can fix it, because I think that Lars has a lot of great changes, as I demonstrated in this video, but I really hope that you can fix that one, because I think that's not... It doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good. And delaying your timing, and listen, let me be very abundantly clear. Are there alternative combos you can do? 100%. It is not as if his combo repertoire has suddenly gone out of the window. Because you can still do that, which does considerable damage. You can still do this goofy route, which does a ton of damage. That, quite frankly, is probably what you want to be doing, because it's optimal as hell. That's what you want. And if you want Oki, well, switch the ender. Perfectly fine. I just don't like that route because it's a little bit technical in that hitting this into this, the 2-1 follow-up is a little bit inconsistent on certain characters and certain angles, so I don't recommend it. You can supplant that, however, and simply go for a 2-jab into back 3 for a more consistent combo that does only a little bit less damage. So it's not really the end of the world. It's just that for me, consistency-wise, I would like to be able to do this combo, his old staple, which is slightly less damage now with the change to forward 3, 2. But to me, his old staple of forward 1, 2, 3 is, I think, still a viable thing, because in other combos it still works. It has no issue in other versions of this combo. That's not the problem, right? That doesn't work anymore. So in other versions of launchers and combos, it still works. It just seems to be a problem specifically for up forward 4. Not that there aren't other things you can do. My advice to players right now is do the combo that you'd normally do for Arc Blast. So for Arc Blast, you can do this. Like, so to me, so quick PSA, the easy combo now in Season 2 is this. Down for 3, down 2, down for 1, 1, 1, back 3. Like that. That's not like the easy combo for big damage. You can do the same with up forward 4. You know? If you want something a little bit more advanced, you want to use a strong aerial tailspin, and go for that. Or you can go for the much more higher damage, well, the slightly higher damage rather, which incorporates everything from Season 2. And that's everything. That's all, folks. I will now end the video with a combo that I did on Twitter when it first launched, Season 2 first launched, which is I will now do a heat dash combo that incorporates several elements of Season 2, and I will do that on Coliseum of Fate. And that's the video, everybody. That was the Season 2 combo, basically. That was the everything I've learned in Season 2 in one combo. So that's the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned a lot. This is a very, very long video. It's probably going to be very difficult to edit. But hopefully you learned something, because Lars in Season 2, he's looking very, very strong. He has a lot of mix-up potential, increased plus frames, which give him very unique situations which he hasn't had before, as well as some added consistency in most ways, one tiny little inconsistency which is unfair. But for the most part, he's a very, very powerful character who continues to grow in strength, even if it needs like a little bit of like sanding on the edges, you know what I mean? But anyway, thanks so much for watching, and look, I hope that they continue to examine Season 2, fine-tune it, keep the spirit of what makes Tekken 8 fun, but make it that it's more fair. And I think that they're going in the right direction with all these changes, and I hope they continue to do that. So once again, thank you Bandai Namco devs for making changes to the game, and I'll hopefully continue to see improvements over time, and I'll continue to support the game in the meantime. So thank you very much for watching, and that was it. See ya.